All right. And we're live. Welcome back to a very special edition of the Bitcoin Treasuries podcast. I'm Tim Kotzman. I'm joined today by Peter Duan. Peter, thanks for joining us and thanks for setting up this live stream.
Dude, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed observing you from afar, and you're absolutely killing this. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your background and your journey to Bitcoin and now your journey to live streams with an orange tie on? I mean, it's got to be quite the interesting little journey there, or big journey.
It's a big journey indeed. So high level, yeah, I went to school at UCLA, but I studied environmental science. And so, as an immigrant child, your parents are saying, hey, study really hard in school, go to a good university, and then once you graduate, you're guaranteed a good job, right? Well, that wasn't my experience. When I graduated, again, with an environmental science degree, I couldn't find a job. Matter of fact, the only opportunity that was given to me was Red Cross offered me a $400 a month stipend. They had to use the word stipend because it was literally below minimum wage. And so I was obviously very pissed. And I was like, well, okay, I can stay mad forever, I can change, right? And so I looked at my fraternity brothers, who are some of the smartest and most, just really clever people. And who do I admire the most? Well, I admire the Wall Street guys. They were sharp, they knew how to make money, and they knew how to make the money work for them. So my ignorant brain was like, well, I'm a smart guy. I'll break into finance, right? But if I kind of knew how long it would take for me to break into finance and how hard it would be, I probably would have done it, because the first year I worked for free. And then the second year I was working actually for Cantor Fitzgerald, working 70, 80 hours a week. But it was a contract position and I was making minimum wage. But then the third year after that, I finally got my own Newport Beach office. Yeah, long story short, I gained a lot of good TradFi experience. And I worked in structured finance at Cantor Fitzgerald. I worked at a non-traded REIT company. I worked at an S&P 500 company doing investor relations. And I even spent some time abroad where I had my own online investment coaching business. And most recently, I was a wealth advisor in LA. So I tell you all that because I think it's important to understand that I'm self-taught in finance, but I also have a deep breadth and depth of various industries within finance. So it gives me a very unique perspective in how the traditional finance world thinks about Bitcoin. Sorry for the long story, but that's kind of how I got here. Yeah, love to know if you have any questions.
How does the traditional finance world view Bitcoin at this point?
Mm. Well, it depends on what type of people you ask, right? So most recently, I was a wealth advisor, and wealth advisors, they're not the most sophisticated finance people. They're often, you have to think, you got to take a step back. What is wealth advisory? Wealth advisory is not to generate as much alpha as possible. That would be a fund manager, right? Wealth advisors instead are incentivized to maintain your wealth. So the mass majority of wealth advisor clients are in their late 50s and older, who are not looking to outperform the market. They're happy with 5 to 6, 7% to preserve their wealth and their lifestyle. So when you're talking to those people, they're extremely reluctant to want to get into something as volatile as Bitcoin. And you have to think, right? Because when you're a wealth advisor meeting with a wealth advisor client, yes, you're talking about their portfolios, but their portfolios have many, many components, right? And so if you're going to introduce something like Bitcoin, but you're only going to allocate 1 to 2%, yet the conversation is going to be mostly dictated about how is Bitcoin doing, why is it volatile, you probably wouldn't do it, right? So we're still quite a long ways off from Bitcoin being, part of everyday wealth advisor conversation.
What's your view on, do you think Bitcoin's volatility and CAGR needs to kind of come down before the floodgates open with uh, Eric Weiss actually published something today, right? He's like, there's some crazy number, like $37 trillion, kind of like blocked off from Bitcoin. Does Bitcoin need to kind of come down into the 20s,
Hmm.
like 20-30% a year before like it really cracks that? Or what's your view on how this kind of plays out, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to tell. The volatility is one thing, but another thing is the regulatory environment. We just entered a new administration where it's much more crypto friendly in general. Um, and then also, when like yesterday, I just wrote a piece on the Bitcoin Policy Institute. They recommended something called Bit Bonds. That is effectively introducing a budget neutral way to raise debt for America using standard treasuries, but also using 10% of it to buy Bitcoin. So if that goes through, then the government, whenever the government rubber stamps something like that, that's going to open more eyes. But at the end of the day, it's the big boys like BlackRock and Fidelity who are leading the charge, and obviously Strategy and Michael Saylor. And just as more eyeballs are on it, the better it is.
And a quick note, because we are on a live stream, I know it says it on the screen, but maybe some people are, taking a walk on the screen. It says ask questions in the chat. So if people want to ask questions in the chat, we'd be happy to, look at those and answer a few of them.
Yes.
Um, okay. So was there like a person that came into your life or an event or a show or a book that fell off the shelf as far as like that moment when you're like, oh, Bitcoin, I
Hmm.
need to like look into this more, or what was that moment if
Yes.
there was one?
No, great question. It is a kind of amalgamation of various points in my life. So I actually got introduced, unfortunately, to crypto in the last cycle. Yeah, I learned briefly about Bitcoin, but like a lot of people who get in it for money go up technology, aka greed, you try to figure out, well, okay, it seems as if Bitcoin's super expensive at that point already. What are ways that I can kind of catch up and through altcoins, right? So I unfortunately lost a ton of money in the last cycle, so I kind of put it to the side. But what reignited my interest in Bitcoin was when the ETFs came live, and that's when I was like, oh, okay, like these big boys are here. I anticipated the big boys to be there last cycle through FTX, but you don't have a large company, the largest one and two asset managers in BlackRock and Fidelity, to put their names behind such a important product without them doing proper due diligence. So that reawoken my interest. And then I stumbled upon Lynn Alden's amazing book, Broken Money. Lynn, I followed her for quite some time. I find her to be one of the smartest macro economists who is also extremely accessible in the way that she defines and explains these trends. It's very interesting because she has an engineering background, so she can almost observe the macroeconomic environment in these mechanistic ways. It's like, well, when this happens, what does this happen? And she does that in such a simple to understand and digestible way. Matter of fact, the best part of that book that I loved was when she broke down how the Fed actually worked. That's the first time where I was like, wow, like it's a very complicated, but for her to like digest to distill it down was very eye-opening. So as I continued to read her and all the amazing Bitcoin content out there, I really became orange pilled over time.
And was it the coaching business that kind of led you to being like, yeah, maybe I should be in front of the screen? Or what was that kind of iteration or process or for you? Like
Great
what
question.
brought you here? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I'm a Christian, and I believe that God often speaks to people, including myself, in whispers. So like a lot of people who've joined this amazing community, saw Quant Bros episode 1, and it clicked for me. I was like, wow. Like I already knew Bitcoin was amazing technology, but I kept my eyes on strategy for a while. And I was like, well, why is it trading at a premium to net asset value? And then they broke it down, and my eyes just shot open. I was like, oh my gosh, this is revolutionary. So I have to give a lot of credit to the Quant Bros, Punter Jeff and Ryquant, for introducing me.
Wow. A couple different directions we could go here.
We can go wherever you want.
Yeah. What do you see over the next 3 to 6 months? I mean, the new administration has been very active and very kind of quick to free Ross and sign this EO on the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. You have the Bitcoin Policy Institute, kind of cranking out that forum where the Bitcoin bonds that you mentioned, that presentation, I thought was I was like, wow, right? I actually had the pleasure of meeting the gentleman that presented that
Hmm.
briefly before the conference started. And then when I was talking to Saylor afterwards, I just said, "What do you think about the bit bonds idea?" He goes, "Oh, it's a no-brainer if you can get the government on board." But that's the question. And so between that and then there was a panel with the BitGo CEO and maybe a few other guys, and it was like, "Oh, how should nation states think about self custody or using custodians?" And the TLDR was kind of like, maybe start out with custodians, but you should definitely assemble a team. Like they literally said, like,
The price action is the most bearish despite the most bullish news. And I was